Definitely know how to fill the time.
I'm sure. I'm excited.
So when Kevin calls,
Yeah, Kevin was feeling sick, yeah.
yeah, I just saw that. So Joan knows that under the rules, even though he won't be in person.
Isn't that the way the rules have changed, Jenna, that if somebody is medically?
He has to, yeah, he just has to notify me.
Yeah, he sent an email
He did
saying he
send
was
an email.
coming down with something.
Okay, yeah, so I would just put medical. I didn't see.
We're good, yeah.
Although I think
Yeah,
that we just
hey
hit.
Trevor. Yeah,
I just missed his email.
Yeah, no, it came in at about 5:30 or something like that.
Oh, okay.
yeah, I didn't see it.
So I emailed after that, so I don't know how I missed that one. I saw Cindy's email just now.
Oh, doesn't matter. Okay, well, it is 7:01 and we have a quorum, which is wonderful. Welcome, everyone. And so, and I don't know, have you started recording? Okay, so welcome to the December meeting, the last meeting of the Climate Change, Energy and Environment Commission. And we'll just go around and introduce ourselves, but I want to start by saying it's Elizabeth's birthday. And if she's lucky, we've been lucky with this scheduling.
Yeah.
We've been lucky with the scheduling. We had Jenna's birthday in September. Anyway, it's
You're welcome. I would just like to note for the record that these are not a bribe to vote for earlier tonight. I figured subtly letting folks know that it's my birthday would be enough.
we should be especially nice to you.
But
Before we do it, I want to note that there have been some changes on the Ethics Committee and that
No, it's all good.
stalwart chair for 2 years. I felt that 2 years is a good amount, which Joan tried to argue that 2 years was good. Less successful. So Elizabeth, as of January 1st, will be the new chair of the Energy Committee. And we are very grateful and appreciative and excited, and we'll vote for everything the Energy Committee does.
As long as you're buying
So-
cookies.
put that in writing.
People go.
And as long as we're talking about changes, you know, Joan, who was chair for 3 years, has been on the commission and has done it so much for all of us, for all through so many drafts of letters, so many wonderful things. Is going to be term limited off the commission later this year, which is
Sure.
later in 2025, not later this year, not later in 2024, doesn't get much later in 2024. So in the interest of beginning to transition, Doug has agreed to be the vice chair, but we are still looking for ongoing committee leadership, so we're reaching out. But let's take a minute to thank. So Joan, we will thank at some point. Hey, Melissa. Joan, we will thank when it's closer to her time of getting off the commission, but we thank you for your years as chair and for transitioning as vice chair. So let's so more to come there, but for Doug, who's actually stepping down at the end of this year, thank you for carrying the energy. The updates at the end.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, well, let's go around and introduce ourselves. So Mark, let's start with you.
Mark Greenwood, Commissioner.
Rob Sandola, Commissioner.
George Fett, Commissioner.
Melissa Ben, Commissioner.
Trevor Montano, Commission.
Elizabeth Whitney, Commissioner, incoming chair of the Energy Committee.
Henry Perlow, citizen.
Kayla Milton, Commissioner. Joan McIntyre,
And still vice chair.
Vice Chair.
Cindy Lewin, commissioner and chair.
Doug Snow, boss.
Jen Fioretti, Assistant County Manager for Climate.
Jenna Peabody, Air Team.
Wonderful. And let's go to the, as we talk about transitions, you see Jason Papakosma up there. Today is his first day as acting head of the air team. Demetra's last day was Friday. So Jason, I promised him he wouldn't have to make a presentation today on his first day, but he has agreed to make a presentation in our January meeting. So look forward to that. But Jason, would you like to take a minute to introduce yourself?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Cindy. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
All right, good. Yeah. Thanks, Cindy. Yep. Today is my first day in this acting role. I've been with the county for 25 years, though, yeah, in the stormwater program. So definitely know my way around the county and environmental programs and stormwater in particular. But looking forward to learning more about the air team and the air program and working with you guys as we move forward. So I appreciate having me listening tonight. I'll be just listening on the sidelines here.
So thank you for being here. Jamie, then Rich. Jamie?
Yes, hello, can you hear me? I'm in an elevator exiting the courthouse metro as we speak. Jamie
Okay, we'll see you, Anon. I assume you're exiting the courthouse metro to come here. Rich?
Hi, good evening, everybody. Rich Dooley, Director of Climate
I'll see
Policy
you
with
in
the
a
county.
moment.
Yes, we'll see you in a moment, Jamie. Sorry, Rich. You want to try that again? You were kind of talked over.
No, it's fine. Good evening, everybody. Rich Dooley, Director of Climate Policy with the county. Thanks.
Thanks. So is there any public comment of any kind that we know of?
I didn't receive any.
Okay. Well then, Eileen, first of all, is it Aileen?
It's Eileen. It's spelled with an A, but just pronounced Eileen. So thank you.
So Eileen, welcome.
Mhm.
We're glad to have you. And
Okay,
I
great.
introduce yourself, heading right into your presentation.
Sounds good. I'm going to go ahead and share here, get this started. So, great. But no, I'm happy to. Thanks for having me to present tonight. So I am the Stormwater Communications Manager for DES, and I've also worked for the county for about 24 years. So I think Jason and I worked at a previous company prior to starting with the county. So anyway, we kind of worked on the stormwater program for a long time as it's grown through many incantations and versions, but and through lots of regulatory changes and improvements. So, but anyway, I'll jump in and feel free if you have questions. We can take questions at the end, but if feel free to clarify. And Jason, also, if you want to jump in and add anything. So just wanted to give an overview. Typically, in recent years, I've been coming to C2E2 at least once a year to kind of give a broader overview of a lot of the different stormwater projects. And then occasionally we'll also come, with more details about a particular project. But again, just our kind of overview of our stormwater program in general. You can see the guiding principles focusing on adaptation, resiliency, environmental management and improvement, and risk mitigation. So these are kind of some of the principles. We also have a number of plans and regulatory commitments that we, are managing and responding to. So we have our Stormwater Master Plan that was adopted in 2014. And more recently, the Risk Assessment Management Plan. I know you all had a detailed presentation about that. That focused some more on assessing risk and looking at cost benefit of some of the projects. But then we also do have a number of regulatory programs that we manage, through our stormwater program, such as our resource protection areas in the Chesapeake Bay Plan and our MS4 stormwater permit, which mandates a lot of our aspects of our stormwater program, and then also our FEMA floodplains, which is another big component of our program. So really, you can kind of think about the program in kind of two larger buckets here. We have our streams and water quality focus, which is looking at more of the streams and watersheds, but that is related a lot to our stormwater permit that comes from EPA down to down to the state to administer, and that includes a lot of components, pollution prevention training, outreach monitoring, and then some of the Chesapeake Bay regulatory requirements for improving the health of the bay are included in that as well. Managing our construction from pollution from construction through the LDA permits. So that's all in that area. But then we also have a big component of our stormwater infrastructure and our floodplain management. And so this is really looking at the more of the system itself, of our pipes and storm drain inlets and all of the components of the system, and how do we maintain that. All of our system is older, so what needs to be replaced, and then what needs to be upgraded, where do we need to add capacity. And so looking at some, particular watersheds where we know that, we've had some flooding challenges and we need to focus on our adding capacity to our system. So we'll talk a little bit more about some of those aspects, but just wanted to kind of give that broad overview. Some of our current challenges that we're dealing with in the stormwater program, obviously, climate change and how that's affecting storm intensity. We have seen, changes and more intense storms over the past probably 5 to 10 years. We do seem to be, seeing some shift in the pattern of the storms, increasing impervious cover. Even though we do have regulations, mandating stormwater management, we have kind of seen a continual increase in our impervious cover in the county. And then regulatory targets. We do have some pretty significant regulatory targets that we need to meet again for the Chesapeake Bay cleanup, that the TMDL, which folks may be familiar with, the total maximum daily load, the pollution diet for the Chesapeake Bay. So again, some of our, oh, sorry, was there a question there or no? Again, feel free to shout out. But so some of our flooding challenges obviously are related to the historical development patterns in Arlington. You can kind of see the map on the right here, I think is really useful. Just talking about some of these issues that we have. You can see the dashed lines show where there originally were streams in Arlington, and then the blue lines show kind of our remaining streams. So we've lost a lot of our natural stream network and natural floodplain areas. So almost upwards of 70%. So that really affects, where we're seeing flooding. And even though you have stormwater pipes and things that replace those streams, it's they don't quite have the capacity and the flexibility, that a natural stream and floodplain area would have. So those are some of the drivers that really pushed us to kind of revisit our stormwater program and really try to shift to a flood resilient Arlington focus. You can see some of the components in here that we looked at doing increased analytics, and a lot of that was reflected in our the risk assessment and management plan that, I know, like I said, you guys had a more detailed presentation on that, but giving us better information about where the risks are currently, outside of just the FEMA floodplains. And then another key element of this is looking for new types and locations for adding stormwater capacity. So instead of just adding larger pipes, are there other kind of innovative approaches we can use? Looking at some of our public spaces, are there potentially multi-purpose approaches that we can use? And we have one project that we've completed kind of as an example of that at the Cardinal Elementary School. But again, looking for trying to be strategic about how we can increase the system capacity. So also increasing requirements for development. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. Significantly increasing funding for the program through bonds. And so this was really in 2020 was the first time that we have done put a bond to the voters for the stormwater management program. So just some background there on flood resilient Arlington. So you can see in the map here, these are some of our focus areas. This is the pink areas kind of show where we have gotten more flooding reports in recent years. And you can see kind of where those are concentrated in this heat map. And then the green stars also show where we have some projects that were focused, to try to increase capacity in those areas. So there are some key watersheds that we are have been focusing on over the past several years, to look at the system capacity. So in some of those critical watersheds, what is our strategy? How do we look at trying to reduce flood risk? So really, as I was talking about earlier, in terms of trying to be innovative and look for kind of a strategic way. So we're looking at trying to use blended engineering, which is really kind of a combination of enlarging pipes, or adding, in some places we might add a secondary pipe, next to the existing pipe, maybe adding additional storm drain inlets. But then also in combination with that, adding stormwater detention, because sometimes if you are just adding more pipes and putting, more water, quickly downstream, that can have negative impacts on some of your natural resources and streams and things like that. So you can see in the map here, this is the Lower Run watershed. You can see the stormwater system in green. You can see some of the data from our risk assessment study. In blue and white, those are some of the inundation areas. And again, these areas are not on FEMA floodplain maps because, this was a location where there was likely a stream before, but there's no longer a stream there, but they still do have that risk. So again, this is just kind of an example of how we're approaching the critical watersheds, not looking at one, small area or one segment of pipe, but really looking at the watershed more broadly and how can we kind of come up with a system approach for that entire area. So just as an example of one of these types of projects, this was in the Torrey Sun Run watershed. So this is, you maybe, remember in 2019, in the really severe storm that we had. This area down here is the Westover commercial shopping area, and there was really severe flooding in that, like the hardware store and the beer garden, the grocery store, all those areas was really, had some devastating flooding, and also the neighborhood further downstream. So this was an area that the community, definitely reached out to the county and was advocating for making a potential, what potential solutions could we come up with. The school was under construction at the time. And there was this is a large stormwater pipe that runs underneath the playground and the fields at the school. And so there was a small vault that had been planned as part of the school construction, and that was able to be, made dramatically increased, to add additional flood risk reduction for the entire watershed as opposed to just the site itself. So you can see here is a photo showing the vault under construction, and then this is the site today. So there's actually two, there's a large vault and then a smaller vault. And so those are underneath the fields at the school, and the playground is here. And so it's, just there underground, providing, that additional protection for the commercial area and the watersheds downstream from there. So we just also wanted to note, it related to floodplains, that we did, the county worked with FEMA to update our floodplain maps and also our floodplain ordinance in 2023. And so that's something that FEMA is requiring more frequently for communities to be kind of revisiting their maps and making changes based on any recent developments. So we did make some changes to the floodplain ordinance as well, and those basically were increasing some of the standards in terms of freeboard, which is sort of, the distance above the floodplain elevation, and kind of the requirements for any structures in the floodplain, increasing the kind of the height of where they need to be protected from the water. So just wanted to note that as well. And then in addition, kind of again along in this area of our stormwater system and stormwater capacity, we do have a relatively new program that we have been working on, which is the voluntary property acquisition program to reduce flood risk. And this has been a key focus in the Spout Run watershed, but that's not the only watershed where we have been approaching this. And so some of these properties are at a higher risk of flooding because they are in those areas where there used to be a stream. There may be a stormwater pipe, buried there now, but it's still a low area, and so there's still, risk of flooding. So this is a new approach, for our program. It just started in 2022. And these properties, as they're acquired, will be used initially for overland relief, which is, just allowing space for floodwaters. But moving forward, they will give us access to infrastructure because, again, in some of these watersheds, for example, like I think when we looked back at if you go back to the Lever Run, you will see that there can be stormwater pipes that are just weaving through, between homes and through people's yards. And so that can make it very difficult, to make improvements to the system. So this type of program enables us, to have access if we need to make improvements, and then potentially if we did want to install detention or something like that in some of these higher risk locations, we might, have more space for that. So. Okay, so I'm just going to shift and talk a little bit also about some of our water quality programs. So I know I'm kind of moving quickly, but I know you all always have a lot on your agenda. So as we mentioned, one of our current challenges is increases in impervious cover. So you can see here kind of the trend from 2009 to 2021. We are seeing continual increases in imperviousness as we have a lot of smaller homes in Arlington as those are redeveloped, and kind of the average home today is much larger than when Arlington was initially built in the 40s and 50s. And then again, we have here the regulatory targets, another challenge that we're dealing with. And as I mentioned, some of these regulatory requirements for the Chesapeake Bay cleanup are included in our stormwater permit, and the way that they were incorporated is over a 15-year period, which is equivalent to 3 permit cycles. So they give you kind of initially a 5%, then a 40% target, and then 100% target. And our pollutants that we are working on reducing, you can see listed here, are total suspended solids or sediment, phosphorus, and nitrogen. So, and the way that the county achieves these targets is by doing projects and running some of the programs that we'll talk about here. So some of these programs here are again helping target some of those pollution reduction requirements. And that's regulating our development activities, which is through the land disturbing activity permit program, and then also working on some of our green infrastructure and stream projects and outfall repair projects. So those all help, again, by reducing erosion, reducing sediment, being washed downstream, which can also carry nitrogen and phosphorus and things with it. So,
Eileen, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Back to that slide. When you're talking about regulating development activities, do you review each new big development? How are you involved with regulating stormwater development? Maybe you're going to talk about that.
Sure. Yeah, I can talk. Jason, I don't know if you want to say anything. Yeah, the next slide we talk about, we do review a lot of plans for stormwater. So specifically for new homes, we have mandatory stormwater requirements, and those were actually increased in 2021 to include additional detention as well. But then there are also the larger plans, the site plans and things, and so our staff are involved in reviewing those as well. So all those different types of development projects. But Jason, did you want to add anything? Or?
Yeah, no, I would just add that, Cindy, so any project that disturbs more than 2,500 square feet of land gets reviewed through the LDA program to comply with stormwater management requirements. So, by number, single family homes are the largest number of projects. They also have the largest impervious area increases too, but we also review, the team reviews commercial projects, residential, high density residential projects as well. It's anywhere from 200 to 300 projects a year that go through this permitting program. Does that help?
Yes, but so when we go to the SPRC meetings, which we're going to be talking about, we have stormwater requirements on our checklist. So by the time that a project gets to the SPRC, citizen review process, have you guys already signed off on it?
No, that would be on the front end, right? That's before, you're talking about before it goes to the board?
Yes.
that right?
report To the
Yeah.
board.
Yeah, and at that level, it's going to be more conceptual, and then they submit an engineering plan and go from there once the board approves the site plan. And they go through the process of all the permits that are required to build it, including stormwater review as well.
So even if we're unhappy at our level, you guys weigh in after board approval when they get down to the nitty gritty and can add some serious requirements.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we're applying the codes at that point, like the stormwater management ordinance applies from there. And happy to talk more about this too, if there's some additional sort of process questions you're getting at in terms of what you review and then what happens later on. Like we could talk more about that as well.
Interestingly, this very next presentation, which you're planning to stay for, this will come up. So, but anyway,
Okay.
I don't want to hold Eileen up. So.
Okay.
Sure. Yeah, I just wanted to be respectful of your agenda. I don't think I have too much more. I just wanted to also touch on some of our water quality projects and programs as well. So, so as Jason mentioned, the LDA program, so that's the land disturbing activity permit. So any project over 2,500 square feet requires one of these permits, if they disturb that much land area. So we did make changes to that in 2021, which increased the stormwater management requirements and added some detention requirement as well, which I think the earlier requirements were focused a little bit more on filtering and slowing down the water as opposed to kind of more of a straight, just detaining some water. So, and then also adding a requirement to restore soil permeability after construction, because that can be really, dramatically affected by just the construction equipment moving around on site that can really, reduce the permeability. So kind of coming out of this LDA program, the county does again require stormwater management for new homes, and you can see here kind of the extent and distribution of those stormwater facilities all throughout the county. So this includes some of our public facilities as well as many of these private stormwater facilities, and the county does require the owners to certify and maintain the facilities. And so for single family homes, I believe they are recertified every 2 years. And then for commercial properties every year. And so just have to submit photographs. And then if there is, if our staff review those and if there is maintenance required or anything like that, then, then the owners are asked to take care of that. So because these are regulatory facilities that were installed as part of the development process. So, and then we do have some larger projects. I know we probably had talked to you all. The Ballston Wetland, is a really significant project that was completed in 2023 for our stormwater program. And so this was really the conversion of formerly a dry pond that was put in, about 40 years ago when 66 was built, but it was never really designed, for any water quality treatment. And then over the years had filled in quite a bit and, had a lot of invasive plants and things. And so it was really just kind of reinvented and redesigned as a wetland, and so offers a lot of treatment and really helps us again towards some of those regulatory goals, but also offering just great wildlife habitat and just a beautiful amenity for the neighbors and all the birds and animals and everything in the area. So that project has been really exciting. And then we are just right now finishing up as well Sparrow Pond, which was a smaller wetland that again it was completed maybe 20 years ago or so, and then had filled in over the years with sedimentation, and so that has been again kind of restored and redesigned. And one key thing for both actually Ballston Wetland and Sparrow Pond is adding what we call a forebay to the design, and that's sort of this area here, this kind of triangular area you see at the top, and that really allows some of the any sediment that's coming into the pond to settle out, and allows for easier maintenance and hopefully preventing the pond filling in too much moving forward in the future. So. And then as well as part of our public program, we do have, a focus on green streets. And this, some of this assessment comes out of our stormwater master plan, where we did a study looking at potential locations where we can add these stormwater management facilities. So you can see some different examples here. But again, they are focused on treating smaller storm events. They're not necessarily intended, for flood mitigation, but they treat, up to about an inch of rain and are able to, kind of hold that and filter and help to clean that runoff. And then during larger storms, it overflows into the stormwater system. So we do have, a number of these. I think as part of, for example, the Gulf Branch Stream Project, we are currently installing some green streets in conjunction with that. So, and then we talked a little bit again about some of these regulatory targets. And so again, for our stormwater permit, we have some of these requirements, and many of these programs, such as the green streets and the projects and the LDA program, those are all included in our permit and help us towards meeting these regulatory goals. So you can see where we are here for our second permit, and then we really have, the bulk of the goal. We'll have to do another 60% to meet our eventual goal for our final permit. So, and Jason, let me know if you want to add anything to that, but I'm almost done, so I don't want to run over on your agenda. So, and I did just want to mention, we do often get a lot of questions about different types of stormwater facilities and sort of, the focus and the intent of them. And so, as I've talked tonight, we talked some about kind of stormwater quantity and improving the capacity of our system, but also stormwater quality and how do we, clean and filter and reduce pollution in our stormwater. And so some of the types of facilities that we install are more of a quality focus. And for example, the green streets, so they're managing water quality, reducing runoff. They're treating smaller storm events, maybe managing water from an acre or two, and then they do overflow to the storm system during larger events. And then we have some of our larger quantity facilities, such as stormwater vaults and these larger detention facilities, and they're really more focused on flood mitigation. And so they can contain a much larger storm event, and they typically manage water from, 100 or 200 acres, as opposed to just an acre or two. So just wanted to clarify, those two types of facilities. We need both of them as part of our program, and so they both play an important role. So just a couple upcoming projects. I know you all had actually, I think the Gulf Branch Stream Project is close to 100% design. I know you all had a more detailed presentation about that a few months ago from some of our staff. We do have the Green Street projects under construction right now. And then we'll also be coming back probably to the commissions in the spring. The state has made some updates to the Chesapeake Bay Preservation Act related to climate change and tree preservation. And so we will be making some updates to our local ordinance as well to address those changes. And then one other project that we're just getting started on is flood resilient design guidelines, basically plan or to create some flood resilient design guidelines. So that's just kicking off, but we'll be reporting out some more on that as we move forward. So I think that's all I had in terms of slides. I'm happy to go back if anyone has a question on anything.
Yes, right. We were nervous. Joan, you have a question?
Yeah, I have two very related questions. One is, what are you thinking in terms of going from kind of the 40? I mean, it looks like you're already working beyond the 40%, but what kinds of projects in that do you see, or is there kind of a change in the types of things you do to get to the 100%? And the other issue is, I had seen the presentation that was done on impervious surfaces for the county board. And one of the things that got pointed out is not only are the houses getting larger, but also with some of the LDA or water retention facilities make the properties very fragmented, and that makes it very hard to actually find room for trees. And are you kind of taking that into consideration in terms of maybe kind of rethinking some of the LDA, you know, how you go about doing that to make sure that it still can accommodate trees, other than hopefully reduce the footprint of property, but.
Anybody jump in on that, Eileen?
Sure. Yeah, I can. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, your first question. The trajectory for the phosphorus and sediment. I think, Joan, will be doing more of the same. You know, the projects you see here, and I think stream and outfall projects and LDA projects will get us there pretty efficiently. Nitrogen is difficult to remove from stormwater. You basically primarily have to do denitrification. So you see that lag there. And one of the benefits we have in Arlington is a really high performing wastewater plant. So we have the ability to essentially borrow, and they're overperforming relative to their permit and their Bay TMDL requirements. So we have the ability to borrow credits essentially to give us more time on the nitrogen. And we're not alone in that. You know, other jurisdictions are facing a similar challenge, but our benefit is we own and operate our wastewater plant. So that's a great thing because we've made those investments as a community, and we can take advantage of it here to kind of give us more time on the nitrogen. The second point, or your question, Joan, the finer point I'd put on it is it's not so much that the stormwater facilities are fragmenting, it's the development is fragmenting it. And so what we're trying to emphasize is creating enough pervious space, leaving enough pervious space on the lots to serve both purposes, the stormwater needs and the tree needs, which of course are interrelated.
Yeah.
So it's just a nuance there, but we're really trying to emphasize we got to put some guardrails around how much paving and building you do on a lot.
Yep. Yeah.
Other questions? So I know that Eileen, you wanted to come and present to us, and Jason happens to be here. Is there something that C2E2 can do to help you? And of course, Jason will be seeing more of you. So this is in your current or last week's job, which I assume you're still keeping. But is there something that you are hoping that C2E2 will do? Stormwater is definitely something that we're thinking about.
Sure.
Yeah,
Yeah, I can jump. Oh.
Yeah, go ahead, Eileen, if you want
Sure.
to start.
No, that's great. I mean, I think, yeah, we'll, you know, like I said, we'll probably be coming back. We have a couple of things, you know, that will be coming up with the Chesapeake Bay amendments, and then also the flood resilient design guidelines. So we definitely, you know, look to be engaging with C2E2 on that. But I think another, you know, key role that we can, you know, could use support on are some of these watershed capacity improvements that we're working on, because again, we're looking sort of watershed wide and trying to make you know, kind of use a different approach. And so it you know, maybe, you know, a little challenging, I think, for folks to, you know, again, it's a new strategy that we're using, you know, trying to add detention and, you know, and also look at the pipe system and make improvements there. So anyway, I think that's, you know, an important place, you know, that we can use commission and also community support, you know, again, kind of recognizing the sort of the future resilience, you know, the criticality of making some of those system updates. You know, we were fortunate in the 2019 storm. We did not have any loss of life, but we had some very close calls, you know, and we're trying to make these system updates, you know, so that, you know, when we have the next storm of that intensity, that, you know, we'll have better resilience and ideally, you know, reduce some flood risks in some of those areas. So.
All right, that's great.
Okay.
Mark?
Eileen, and Jason, are you guys still using the 10-year storm as a kind of minimum standard that you're hoping to achieve, with a 100-year storm as kind of with overland relief as a longer-term goal? Are those still kind of goals of the system that you're trying to pursue?
Yes. I mean, that's the basic approach. Like we look at the ramp, for example, what we modeled, and it was a 10-year storm, and then things that go when we model a 100-year storm, where's that water going to go? So, but I think as you probably know, a lot of the current system doesn't even convey that 10-year storm itself. So, that gets back to these other approaches, detention approaches and overland relief property acquisition. So it's sort of like looking forward, what standards do you set and what are they informed by? And the ramp got into a lot of that. But in the system that we have, there's obviously a lot of limitations there too. So we kind of have to deal with both things, what we have and what lies ahead.
Okay. Well, I think in the interest of time, thank you very much for your presentation, Eileen. And
Sure.
Sounds like you will hear more from you in the spring.
Yep.
Thank you. So the next item on our agenda is to follow up on our talk at our last month's meeting in November about our SPRC checklist. What we do, we review developments, commercial developments, housing and office, hotel, all of that, the new Y. And we have a standard checklist, which has been incredibly helpful. And Mark presented in November on the way that our checklist actually works, the way different things are rated, and whether after a couple of years it's time to update it. And we asked Mark, and then I asked Rob too, to sort of come back with a straw man. But I think that we aren't quite to that point, but we have ideas to talk about. And then we will. I know one question that's been raised is whether we should wait until the policy that the county has been working on with our commentary is done, and then we can match our checklist to that. I think that is going to take. I think the green building incentive policy, which is on our list to talk about later, is going to take a while. And I think if we're not happy with our checklist now, not that we're not happy with it, but if we think it can be improved and we can, as we review developments, there are a lot of SPRCs coming up. As many of you have reason to know, and thank you, Joe, for going to one, and I know I'm picking up one on Thursday. I think we should make our checklist as good as we can, and then we will probably have to update again when the green building incentive policy is finalized, but I think that's not going to be tomorrow. So with that, thank you, Mark. Thank you, Rob. And Mark, I think you've done a lot of research as background for what's been useful. And so over to you.
This is, I'll explain this in a minute. It's new data. Okay. But to pick up on your point, we have talked a bit and certainly agreed, I think, that the notion should be, let's see what can be done in the short term that could be an improvement. At the same time, recognizing that green building incentive policy will kind of alter the furniture once it's done, but it could take a while. So, but the notion, as you were suggesting, that what we'd want to do then is do something that we can in the short term. I mean, not tomorrow, but reasonable short term, and then see where the green building incentive policy ends up, and then make some adjustments. I think one of the things that's kind of emerged from our discussion, but also with other conversations I've had with other folks, is this idea of dealing with the weighting issue, which is, I think, significant. And it's the kind of thing you probably want to focus on sooner rather than later. And we talked about that, and that was kind of one of those things you probably want to put on the list as something to look at. For those who were here, the way in which weighting works is you have a certain amount of a percentage of the 100 that goes with each category. And then there are a certain number of subcategories, and they have to split up the percentage that goes to the category. And the general default rule is they split it evenly. So if you have let's say 4 subcategories, you split it 4 ways. If you have 2 subcategories, you split it 2 ways. And it doesn't have to be like that. That's just an artificial, was in the equation, you know, that's how it worked when it was created. And so the question I think for the group is at some point, do you want to have the ability to say, okay, within these 4 subcategories, we think this one is more important than that. And we think it should have a greater weight. And then imagine what this looks like as people fight over the, the allocation. What's more important than this? But you have to kind of do that if you want to.
And if we want to add some new subcategories based on things that have become priorities in the last few years,
Yes.
then we're just taking away, you know, and we have sort of a catch-all, the environmental category, and things are already only worth 2 points in there, and that's where we want to put some more categories. Then if we don't change the weights, then everything, there's no incentive. I mean, people will only get 1 point for doing things.
Right.
So it won't change their score. So why should they care? Assuming that they care what we think. Anyway,
Developers, I don't think.
Yeah.
County board takes it a little more seriously, but they
Right.
still vote for the projects anyway. You know, I think at this point, we just forget about the scoring and all that, and let's start with, you know, with the categories, with the description of what's the ideal, you know, what is it? And then what's kind of the minimal acceptable. So like on energy electrification, it's like if they're not electrifying the basic systems, they essentially fail. And then there's some add-ons to that you can go from there, but you can, you know, and we can break down the categories. And then it's some things to think, what do we do about certification? Because in some ways, certification is just a reflection of a lot of different things. It has some value, but you know, it's some of those other, because LEED doesn't necessarily mean anything because they can pick and choose so much that they could actually build something that didn't really meet some of what we think is critical minimum requirements.
So Mark, you've looked at what we've found that developers are doing and what they, and I think that's what you're going to talk about as background. Yeah. So let's do that, and then let's go back to Joan's point.
So should we dive right into this?
Yes.
Here's what I tried to do. And I think I learned some stuff that I wasn't expecting, and also thought I'd learned some things that I didn't. What I tried to do here was to take, and this was a hard database to put together because I wanted to take a look at the, essentially the checklists that we sent into the county board. And that starts as a set of such checklists in 2022. It's the first time you started to see the cover letter. Used to be in the past, the cover letter was all that was sent. But you begin to see the checklist showing up going to the county board. And so the difficulty is you have a database of 14 sites if you do that. Yeah. But it's the only way I could find a consistent set of checklists to evaluate. So that's basically what I did for the 14. So the way to think of this is the numbers, this, by the way, on the left is, of course, the basic checklist that you know and love. And that's what it is. What it is on the right there, you see exceeds, meets, falls short. Those are the number of sites that went through the system for each of the individual building components. And that's how many sites met that standard. So what you see is, and let's, if we can kind of go down a bit, you begin to see a pattern developing, which is the meets standard, whatever it is, tends to be the most powerful. Could you go down a little further? Yeah. See, as you get down here, you're beginning to see very substantial scores. What that means, of course, is let's say 10, 13, 11, those are the numbers of sites of this gigantic database of 14 sites that actually, that's the rating they got on that particular.
So there are some things
Criteria.
that everybody's meeting.
Yeah. One,
And so what it means, I think, and this is what struck me that I was surprised at, is that it is essentially what the meaning is of what we view as the meets standard, essentially. And when you look at that, take a look at that sometime and say, how rigorous is that? People are moving to that set of criteria, and they may stay there. There's no guarantee they have to go to a higher level of performance. So it struck me that one of the questions we should be asking ourselves is there enough rigor in what's in there as the meets standard?
If you look at that stormwater management one, and of course, we're just talking about stormwater management, you were pointing out that meet Virginia Building Code, which is required by law. Not
Already
that
required by law.
Not that rigorous.
And is Jason still with us? By the way, did Jason
Yeah, I
take
think
on?
he is.
Yeah.
I'm here.
I wanted to ask you, by the way, I did have the impression, by the way, that some of the folks in DES, Liz Thurber and company, were actually reviewing some of these sites, that at least the ones that go through SPRC review, before we saw it.
Yeah, well, that's what I was.
For one thing, somebody has to decide whether it's complying with state and local law.
Yeah.
And I had the impression that that was being done, at least for these bigger sites, that was being done before we would see it through the SPRC process. Is that?
Let me check on that, because I want to give you the right answer. I mean, there is a review that occurs, but it's not the detailed compliance review that happens after. But I don't want to give you the wrong answer, so let me check on that one, okay?
I mean,
I'll get
no,
back to you.
if it's different, that's fine, but I know that Liz was working very hard on
Mhm.
looking at some of the sites that we were seeing through the SPRC.
So
Well-
if you,
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
sorry,
Okay.
so if you'll report back to us, Jason, that'd be great. If you get a meets on everything, you're still only getting a 66 or a 67, which is pretty much
67.
Yeah.
pretty much a failing score. So the lack of rigor, it sort of goes with the lack of
Right.
high score. But to John's point, the county board passes. If they're getting in the 60s, the county board is thinking, well, that's what we're saying meets. So they're sort of, so, that's where you get into John's question of should we set some few standards that are just like pass fail, like if it's not all electric, then,
Yeah, well, that's the one that does show up. There were a few here
right,
where there is rigor at meets.
right.
And those are the ones that several of those go to the.
Yeah, and maybe we should leaving aside the weighting, but Rob, did you want to say something?
Yeah, a couple key points here. One is that, and my understanding is that the category on the left, the meets, is if it meets the green building incentive policy. That's where, and if we want that score to be 66%, if they meet everything in the green building policy to meet that, that's the left column, and the right was the more aggressive climate plan, right? Is that how this was structured?
mostly, other than I think we were a little bit more stringent when it came to electrification and some of the key. Sorry.
But we shouldn't be.
Yeah.
That's my point, is that if we
Yeah.
want to change the policy or advise the county to change the policy to make it more rigorous, but we have to score
Yeah.
against a standard that is county policy. And so whether we want that, we can change the weighting and we can change the score to make that
Yeah.
80 instead of 66 or whatever it meets the GBI, or if there's multiple levels of the green building incentive policy, we want to change the weighting there, but we should make it match the policy. What we're assessing and telling county board is, you passed this policy, we've assessed this development plan against this policy, here's what we think, here's how they rate against that policy. Is that not what we're doing?
Oh, I know that Mitch, who I think is here, has said that developers complain that, hey, the county has this whole policy And then we come in and we score them against our own standards, which are not in line with the policy. And they find that very confusing, but arguably, if the county staff is already scoring them on the green building incentive, are we adding value if we score again against that policy? So I think you raise a great question of whether that is what we should be doing.
We should at least be scoring against that policy. If we want to set higher standards and score against other things, we can, and I think that was the second column,
Right.
For the exceeds was, or meeting our climate action plan or other goals or community energy plan goals, which are higher standards, and we're assessing whether or not to meet those too. But yes, we can change both that to address Mark's earlier point about the weighting. It's easy to adjust the weighting by just eliminating categories. Many of these categories are overlapping. The energy category, energy efficiency, is kind of covered in some of the standards of whether or not it could be covered in LEED or maybe not, depending on what they check off. But sometimes we're double counting some things. Sometimes, so these are not mutually exclusive categories either, right? So we want to take a hard look at this and see what's most important for us to rate. Really give the county board information on, here's the policy you passed, here's how we think they do against that policy, and then here's what extra we think they should be doing.
Well, the other thing is that the way we've always presented it is you have a CEP goal to get to carbon neutrality by 2050. And to do that, we need to eliminate greenhouse gas emissions. And therefore, regardless of whether it was, meeting the goals of what's in the GBIP, we were saying what they're proposing will not meet the CEP goals, and those buildings will be in existence in 2050. So that's kind of the way we phrased it and pointed it, and that it's kind of that CEP goal that is kind of driving some of the overall. But then when you get into the other things, it does get, and
There's a lot of this stuff that overlaps.
yeah.
I think this is,
Yeah.
If you have the biophilia.
Yeah.
And you believe in that, you're going to overlap with a bunch of things that
Yeah.
are also very important
Yeah.
for stormwater.
And some of
And-
it's confusing and not terribly useful.
Well, I think the thing that struck me as I went through it, I was really focusing in on the meat skin. We have a bunch of things that are sort of preparatory for what you really want to get in the, at the higher level. And so some people maybe have figured out, I'm going to do the preparatory thing and that's it. And I'm going to get approved anyway.
Right.
And so that leaves for us the question of, do you want to have a higher mark for what it means to meet? And that becomes an important issue.
Yeah, let's get some opinions around the table because we won't be able to talk about this.
Yeah, I'm a little newer to this now, kind of only a year into this mission. But I guess to Joan's point, like if you're trying to put the county on a glide path to zero carbon by 2050, like how do we look at, okay, well, how many redevelopment projects are there likely to be between now and then? How many new development projects are there likely to be between now and then? How are we ultimately going to get to zero carbon by 2050? Because I feel like we're starting from the bottom at the micro project level and trying to set standards, but ultimately the county's got to be on a glide path to 2050 if that's what we're all shooting for.
I think it makes sense to have like a meets, exceeds, falls short kind of categorization. But I think maybe the way we present that to the board changes based on what category that's in. Like if something's falling short of expectations across multiple categories, we should really strongly say, do not approve this project. This doesn't meet our standards. This is going to send us backwards. Like we oppose this project.
Right.
If it meets all the standards, we should perhaps remind the board that approving every project that simply meets the standards is not sufficient to achieve the county's goals. And if something exceeds our standards, maybe we should say, this is something the county should highlight. The county should, perhaps look for ways to highlight this building or give additional incentives, or this is a candidate, to
Jamie mentioned that like a brand, like a super brand.
That's a great idea.
Right. That's something that they can market with.
But, my other comment is, having done one of these, I could not do this by myself. Like Rob had to do this for me. Like,
Now the ash race stuff.
this is really challenging for someone who's not in this world, and I have half a toe in this.
I was about to say, but you
So-
are in this one.
So every single thing to me felt like looking for a needle in a haystack. And so if there's a way to kind of streamline and say, you know, how do we tell if something's really falling short? Well, they haven't considered, you know, electrification at all, and they have no EV spots. And like, to the extent that we can really home in on like, what are the things that are really red flags for us that, you know, there's a risk of the county approving this project, maybe because it, you know, meets all the baselines, but they, you know, we really can't tolerate it. And what are the things that we're looking for, you know, that if you hit 5 or 6 of these things, we would feel comfortable, you know, either putting that gold star or saying like, we should be highlighting this project, putting it on the website, telling other builders about it, looking for ways to reward this builder and make it more like what the standard should look like going forward.
That's what the green building incentive policy update should be actually doing, is getting that incentives to go beyond the minimum.
I would like to go a step further, or maybe work something in parallel. And we talked about this, and others who have done these scorecards have seen that sometimes the sustainability documentation is a needle in a haystack, and sometimes the needle is just not there. And so we need to have the developers and maybe work with SPRC to say, don't even hold your first board meeting until we have complete sustainability documentation. You wouldn't do it unless you got whatever the 30% design or what, you know, so
Right.
this is part and parcel of your package. And if you don't have a
Are
complete
gonna be-
sustainability documentation that addresses most or all of these, whatever we consider the key ones, then don't start the review process. I would like to pursue that in parallel. So, and that's going to take work with SPR
Yeah.
outside our.
Well,
They are moving it.
One thing I think it's important for us to consider though, as part of that, is do we have too many kind of people are talking about, you know, the core things that are really important. Great. I think when I go through this, as I did 24 hours, there's stuff in here I say, is this important? I really don't. I'm not sure.
Yeah, and we'll have to figure out, I mean, the other thing is we have to keep in mind is we have to be able to assess it, given what we kind of know what the documentation is that's presented.
Yeah.
A couple quick things. I have heard that, I mean, they did say they're going to require a much bigger sustainability package as part of the initial documents, the change to administrative reg 4.1. 2, on my projects, I've ended up, because I can never find the needle in the haystack, ended up sending a list of questions and asking staff to forward that to the developer, and staff has said, well, the developer doesn't have to answer this, this is outside our process. And I've said, well, give it a shot. And every time I've gotten, you know, detailed information because, you know, they want to be helpful. They want us to give them a good score. So just know that that's an option out there. Melissa?
I totally agree with you. Similar comment. I'm only on month 2, so I haven't done a single one of these. But I have done similar scorecards, and I have found that what's actually sometimes a percentage like 67, 33 can be really confusing. And what's actually a little easier to simplify scoring to be like 0 is meets expectations. We give this 0 points. And then negative is it's failed something, and then like +1 and then +3 is like an amazing project. And just a super simplified scoring. So it's much easier to see, because sometimes if you're like 67 versus 83 and you can get kind of lost in numbers, but having it really clarified, like we give this 0 points means it's not impressive, you've met legal requirements, et cetera.
The one thing that I actually think is very valuable about that is to start thinking about risk communication. I used to work at EPA. At one point I ran the part of EPA that regulates chemicals. Biggest problem I had as the director of this office was communicating the risk of chemicals to the public. Because it's very, very difficult, and it gets very, very complicated very quickly. And the difficulty is we have too many ways in which we measure this. And you really need to get something that people can understand. We, for example, have a numeric score, which has its own culture and sort of dynamic. And the letters that we send always indicate that you have this percentage and it's therefore not acceptable for things like energy. At the same time, we use a term like kind of meets expectations. In the world of risk communication, that coming from a regulator or hardest grader in the game, this is great. Industry loves it. They love it.
Yeah.
And they use it.
Yeah.
And so we have two different kinds of ways in which we articulate our point of view, and they're different. They don't match up, and that's one thing I really discovered in this project. They don't match up.
Yeah.
You can have a bad score and say, hey, it meets
Yeah,
expectations.
well, again, and it's that tension that we were running into in the way, again, we can rethink how we do it, is that the baseline was GBIP. Basically, that's what the developers had to follow. They didn't have to really pay any attention to us because we weren't the ones that, were going to approve anything. Ours is our communication to the county board saying, you keep approving these projects and they're not going to meet your broader goals. So think about it. So, we can rethink about, how we do that and what we do. And then we were always very careful is unless a project was not participating in the GBIP, we didn't say we said they shouldn't approve it. Because, we really couldn't do that because at least they were, following what was required.
Not just the
Under the
building codes,
GBIP,
but the
yeah.
rebuilding.
Center
The
policy.
county was
So,
asking for better than average.
yeah. So again, we can kind of rethink all of that kind of approach and
Right.
communications. Again, this is our vehicle and it is a very powerful one of communicating to the county board that we keep building buildings that aren't going to meet the carbon neutrality.
I did raise that. I testified for the planning commission about some building and I raised that and said, this is a terrible score. Or I said, I've got good news and bad news. This is a terrible score. It's one of the best scores we've ever given. But if we keep passing these buildings, you will never meet your goals. And they said, fine, they passed it right then and there. At the end of the meeting, Kenley Peterson stopped and said, with the C2E2 person said, what are we doing? We're approving project after project. Why are we doing this? I said that clip around to everyone just before many of your time. But, so they had the discussion, which was, well, we're keeping Arlington humming. Great. So I think getting their attention and getting away from the meets language is a good idea. So how are we're going to run out of time. So, and I know that we weren't, again, planning to vote on something. There are a lot of changes. I mean, I think we should a lot of this references LEAD 4.1. I think we should go to LEAD 5.0 across the board. 4.1 is getting old. I think.
Or it sounds like you were saying other things are folded into that, so you could maybe lead it all together.
Right.
Yeah. Well, again, let's hone in on
Concentrate on the elements that go.
critical elements,
the number.
and then we can decide, how do we want to treat whether it's lead version gold or whether or not, I mean, if they go for Passive House or Living Future Institute, then we've got something that, we know is going to exceed across the front. So we that, but they also put in other elements that we can't really go down, in terms of quality of health issue, kind of materials and things like that. So I think, but again, what are the core issues that we think are critical? And then how do we treat some of those other elements and what things do we just abandon? It's not useful.
Right. And if we get rid of some of these things that are, so besides following state law, which is the worst one, the other one about providing a narrative on your energy plan.
Yeah, that one's.
Yeah.
And then if you
There's a lot of
post it on your
Greenwashing.
you post it on your website, you just exceeded. I mean, we can add more rigor just by, some of these things were hard for people to measure. This was a great attempt to do that. The things we can't measure, then maybe we just can't count. And so that will lower the scores and will get us away from meets expectations and that whole language too.
Yeah.
Joe?
Where in the process does the county score for GBIP?
I mean,
But it's done through the projects go in front of the site plan review committee. And we sit on members, so we sit as a member. So, and then we're evaluating, and then ultimately we go to in front of the planning commission.
But
and
the
then
county's already looked at the GBIP by the time it comes to the end of the year.
Yeah,
So
Or at least-
before the process that we are engaged in as public citizens.
So his point earlier then, if they've already scored it, why did we score again to?
So why don't we just have different standards?
Well, and not every development participates.
That's definitely
How many of
true.
these 14?
Yeah, sometimes.
most of them
These
have been.
All 14 are ones that were in, right?
Yeah.
They qualify for bonus density under GBIP.
I mean, most have been participating, although over the last few years, it's only been, not all of them have been participating under the current GBIP because there was a grandfather period in there where the criteria was slack, but it's somewhat unusual for projects not to participate.
They showed the county showed a graph last time, something
Yeah.
like, like more than 2/3 of the development is in GDP, and less than a third decided not to participate. They have those stats.
Right. So as we move toward next steps, I think it's something we'll continue to talk about. What's really important to us, changing the scoring, changing communication. It's starting to be a big project. It's starting to look like a bull. You're right.
Well, what we just talked about here is amazing.
Yeah.
It's the real work.
Yeah.
And how can we have a conversation if we can only have two of us in a room at a time?
Have to do it by email.
Yeah.
You have to send things around by email.
They did that. Different 2x2s and.
Yeah, well, with 14 people, that's a lot of two.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I think,
It really helps if we start documents and people just play in or add in. I mean, don't worry about whether or not somebody's gonna, kind of jump over you. It would really help the discussion and the consideration of getting everything on paper or at least electronically somewhere that we can look and then, one or two people can pull all the ideas together and come up with another iteration. And maybe it's starting with what's the first thing do we need to do to kind of get this going.
and I know, Elizabeth, when you circulated your letter to the Energy Committee, you had you just marked different places that said, I'm interested in feedback on weather, whatever. And so that really gave people a chance to focus, and people were free to comment on other.
They did not stick to.
I know. People were free to comment on other areas, but I mean, that is helpful. Like,
One thought too, Mark, is maybe the Energy Committee can be helpful because you get a larger group of folks and some input and some feedback from folks who maybe do have, hopefully more experience in the building code world than I do. But we could look at that as a larger group, do some of that work, and then bring something forward to C2E2 that's a little bit further along in terms of finding those areas where, we can consolidate. And then the 2x2s are not quite so laborious. Be happy to chat with you about if that might be helpful or not.
We have to do the same on environmental though too, which is a much smaller cast of characters.
yeah, that's true. Well, thank you all. Any last comments? So Mark, I think to spearhead this, I think your name, as it was last year, it's still SPRC's Mark Greenwood. I've added that again for 2025. But, this is a big work job and we will work together. And I think Rob's available.
Yeah.
And I think we'll just maybe issue by issue with emails. I know we all get very engaged once a month. It's hard to remember it. It's about to be the holidays, but I think we can hang on to the ideas long enough. I mean, what we're going to do about environmental justice and equities. Right now we have no way to measure that, but we don't want to signal that it's not important. So those are issues that people may have thoughts on. So maybe we email them around one bit. Anyway, with that, thank you very much. Thank you for going back, and thank you also, Rob. Thank you for going back to look at what we were doing, and I think that will help inform what we do. So, anything else? With that, then I think we turn to Elizabeth and or mention climate change resolution. Let us.
So thanks to everybody who took a moment to take a look at this letter. We've been hearing for, I guess, a couple months that the board is considering a climate resolution. There have been a couple outside groups who have called on the board to do that. I think it's incumbent on C2E2 to be among the groups that is pushing the board and ahead of the board on this. And so part of the impetus for doing this letter is how quickly the board may be moving to do a resolution, but also the opportunity that I think we have here to give some early feedback on what might be included in a climate action plan, which seems like the momentum has been behind changing what would have been a community energy plan, which was due this past year, but for various reasons kind of been pushed into the future. Now this idea to do a climate action plan, it seems like there's every reason in the world to have the board give some direction and clarity, which I think could really help speed that process up, make sure that the staff doesn't have to come back to the board to approve policies. If they can give some direction, then that document can be self-executing, which is a huge priority for me because personally I was disappointed that the community energy plan required an implementing document that came out 2 years later. So I think we can potentially save a couple years here on our climate action by encouraging the board to give that direction at the same time as they're doing a climate resolution. I don't know if they will. Might be a lot. It doesn't really 100% line up with how they're probably going to do the resolution, but I think it's a valid idea, and I'd like to give it a try. So this letter I've sent around a couple versions. I hope this is the one that Joan commented on just today.
Yes.
She had some good additions. The first thing I wanted to ask is we reviewed this letter at the Energy Committee. Somebody mentioned that there's a new incoming chair, and I'm not sure when that changeover takes place, whether it makes sense to address this.
It's January, it's January 1st.
They make a formal vote on the chair is.
So if
Okay.
So we don't know.
we approve,
In that case, given the date of the letter,
if we approve this, so if we approve this letter tonight, which I hope we will, then we can send it to Libby
that's
and we'll
fine.
get it out tomorrow.
We could send it as soon as tomorrow.
Yeah.
If I dated it December 17th.
Yes.
Aspirational.
I think one of the confusion is that JD had his swearing in on Saturday.
Okay.
And the thing is that I think they have to swear him in before his term starts, with his January 1st. And they used to always meet their organizing meeting on January 1st, and now it's like the first Monday afterwards. Anyway, it'll be on the 6th.
Okay.
So that's, it's just.
We can dispense with that.
Right.
A number of changes made at the EC. Just to point out, there was some discomfort with making the change in federal leadership called out as an impetus for this. Totally unrelated. But I think it was a bit extraneous and unnecessary. So we removed that. Reorganized a few things. One of the big changes that was made at the EC level is ensuring that energy does not get short shrift just because we're expanding the scope of this. And it is really important, I think, that energy is a huge driver of emissions, needs to be a centerpiece of a climate action plan. But there was some hesitance on the EC to the idea of doing a climate action plan instead of a community energy plan. So just want to raise that to this group. Could be because obviously the Energy Committee is very focused on energy, but I do think that this makes the most sense for the county. It's something that we should have in our hands. I know many, many areas already have something like this or have embarked on something like a climate action plan. And so I think the urgency to have some kind of a document is sufficient here. Mark, did you have a comment?
I have a question. I apologize first because I have not studied this carefully. So I have a lesser voice. Legitimately. You folks know about the CivFed has filed a resolution with the county and the board about adaptation.
I don't know that.
I have a copy of it.
Yes.
Senator.
Yeah.
That to you.
What's the name
The
of
Civ Fed resolution,
Yeah.
like in 3
Except
months
it-
ago,
spell
No, it was
Yeah.
much more recent.
more recent than 3 months. Okay.
They've had it
6
around
weeks.
for a couple of months, but I.
They've been moving it around, but they finally sent
The
it.
Civic Federation?
Yeah.
Is that, okay, okay,
That's the one is the umbrella organization for all the
okay,
civic
yes,
associations.
Yes.
Yeah.
October 29th.
Look at that. in hard
Yep.
copy.
No,
But it's highly focused on adaptation and thinking that we've already managed the mitigation part of it. So, yeah, which, you know,
I don't think they really think we've managed.
yeah, but if you don't do mitigation, adaptation's kind of pointless because you can never keep up with it.
Yeah, but I
Yeah,
think
it's
it's an indicator
Yeah,
of the fact that the topics they're raising is a missing piece.
mhm. That should be part of a
It should
climate
be
action
part of
plan.
what climate action plan.
Yeah. Yeah.
How much of that is a role for C2? That's a
I think
question.
what I'm trying to do right now is not actually dictate the language of the resolution. God knows that's going to be subject to great debate among all the board members themselves, and agendas, et cetera, et cetera. We're trying just to set the broad concept is like, yes, climate resolution, great idea, let's do it.
Yeah, I mean, I think if I were to sum up the letter, it would basically say, you should do a resolution. It should set new ambitious goals. And you should direct the staff to do a climate action plan. And here's, 5, 6 things that should be in that plan.
It
So
has some-
we're a little bit more focused on what's in the plan than
Yeah.
what's in the resolution. Because, I think that's what is going to be the living document that guides, future work. And I want to get ahead of the risk that there's a report because it's time to do a report, and then there's another implementing document because the report was a report and the implementing document is an implementing document. So I think we have a great opportunity here to leapfrog over some.
I just think it's useful to find a way of connecting with these folks. They feel, I do know, several of them. They feel very strongly. And they're going to communicate that.
I think we're aligned.
Okay. So but then that's why I think that's probably true. So why not?
Yeah, well, the climate action plan, I mean, because an energy plan, especially Arlington, it just looks at scope 1 and 2. And a climate action plan will look at scope 3, which is body carbon waste and those types of things. Plus it can look at resiliency, adaptation and those types of issues that, we're going to face climate change. So we have to also be prepared to take care of that as well.
Right.
So that's the difference. So it's CEP plus.
It's your suggestion that we reference that letter in our letter? Not necessarily. Not.
I think my suggestion is talk, which is if we do it all ourselves, you're going to miss something. And they won't necessarily understand some of the points we make here. And I think it's finding a way to talk.
Is Fed happy? I mean, any of us would be happy to come talk to them. But
I have a question in the letter itself. I think it's a little, it's up a little bit, but it talks about a 50% reduction in GHGs. And kind of, maybe there needs to be some more clarification about what that means within that sentence.
Yeah. So Arlington County currently has a goal of net zero by 2050.
It's carbon neutral.
Carbon.
That's like
carbon
the
neutral?
technical term they're using.
Okay.
Yeah,
Carbon neutral by 2050.
yeah, except that it's all based on zero emissions. Carbon neutral is
We
a
should
weird
stick
phrase.
with it.
Yeah, so I just would flag that.
That's a good flag. Happy to have you change that.
Yeah.
And
So is that supposed to be like an
Carbon
intermediary
neutrality.
goal reduction, like a target?
I'd want to suggest that a goal should be something that we might not reach. That we should have to really try and prioritize and hop into gear to rally around. Carbon neutral by 2050 is too far away.
Yeah.
And too reachable by too many paths. So if everything we do to reduce, any iota of carbon emissions can be thrown into the bag, then we don't really have an incentive to say we should do this, but we can't really afford to do that, or this is going to be too time consuming, or this doesn't have the biggest bang for its buck. And I think we're at a point where we don't have time or money to do all the things we could do to reduce emissions. We have to drill down to the things that are just ambitious and like possibly going to fail, but we just can't do everything in the toolbox.
So with
So
the,
these are examples of more urgent, more ambitious goals that the county could set to replace carbon neutrality by 2050.
When that 50% is taken, that's what IPCC is saying we have to meet in order to kind of avoid even worse climate catastrophe.
I mean, naturally, there would be a 50% reduction from some baseline.
Yeah, I think they used 2009 or something. I don't know, but
Or 2005 to the wood.
yeah, it depends on, what year they measured it to start with.
so would the 50% reduction be by 2040?
2030.
Okay.
We have 2040 in the letter as like
Counties.
moving that up.
County government operations, different from a whole of county.
So are you okay making it clear that there's a target date for that?
Absolutely, yeah. So these are achievable but stretch goals. So there would have to be some prioritization. There would have to be, something beyond maintenance of effort in terms of policy. And so we have a number of individual items that should be included in the climate action plan to reach that goal. But allowing the staff to kind of determine, okay, if this is our goal and we want to look at, buildings or, electricity or grid and mitigation, like how are all these things combined to get us to that goal? But if the goal doesn't change, then neither will the programs, policies, and the action. The Joan had added can be acted on even while the plan is being developed. Love it.
Yeah, my concern is that it's gonna take 18 months to do a climate action. Kind of the way these things work. Basically, we have to build the airplane while we're well in flight. So it's gotta be, the resolution has to be specific enough that it provides guidelines for Jen to get the whole of government on board to actually start introducing the programs and things like that really needed to accelerate while we're fine tuning this thing.
Yeah, I get that. I don't think that sentence actually does what you're trying to do. I think I understand what you're trying to do. First of all, so when you say plan is being developed, the plan capitalized, capital P, plan, down, down, down. They are effective plans to be capitalized, so that's referring back to that climate action plan at the beginning sentence. But then, what you really want to say is the plan must be both ambitious, self-executing, and the board must provide sufficient direction to provide. Because otherwise it sounds, the width ties in with the plan.
Thank you, John.
Board must provide. Yeah, okay. Direction,
Excellent.
or just provide. Yeah,
Yeah, that's good, yeah.
and the board must provide in the resolution. Is that what you're trying to say? In the resolution?
I'd like to see it in the resolution.
Yeah,
because
let's
I'd
put
be
it-
surprised to see them
Okay.
do a secondary document.
Yeah, let's
Yeah,
say,
yeah, yeah.
Again, take more time.
in the
The board
resolution.
must provide sufficient in the resolution, the sufficient direction.
Yeah, I mean, this gets
Right.
kind of confusing because we
In the
need to
resolution.
between a plan and a.
Yes, and that. And it's to hopefully make that a little bit clearer.
Resolutions be capitalized.
So
Excited. Got me excited. I was an editor for 7 years.
I appreciate it.
And we all have a note from Kevin Vincent saying that he likes the letter and is supportive.
Great. Thanks, Kevin. So we have,
Can you get rid of the so
Yeah,
as after
Kevin
presentation?
is this.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Kevin.
so there are 7 elements that we think should be in the climate action plan and therefore called out in the resolution. Joan added an 8th, which we'll set below. And I think 1 and 2 could be combined. The EC did not think so, but just want to flag. I was trying to get at number 2 in the section number 1 that I had written. So just to flag that, because I'd love to have as few sections as possible. But number 1 is a vision for local leadership on climate action. This talks about things that are within full county purview, our operations, our purchasing choices, our programs, et cetera. These should all reflect our values and our community's commitment, as well as starting to connect Arlington County with other jurisdictions that are similarly in climate. I think that this will happen partly because of what's happening at the federal level, partly because it has happened already. But I'd love to see Arlington connect with, sister cities, sister jurisdictions around the country that are really trying to do something ambitious. Number 2, decarbonizing county and APS operations. Again, I think this is connected. So I
Keep
would
moving, Elizabeth.
say that again.
Keep moving.
Okay. Number 3, plans to ensure a path to a zero emissions grid. This is about, pure energy in the power sector. Number 4, the built environment. And Joan, I would love to see if we could add something about access to nature in that section instead of making it its own. Number 5, cost-effective transportation planning. 6, adaptation, and then 0 waste. So these would be kind of the large chapters of a climate action plan, in my view. Let's start with Doug.
Thank you. I'll just throw this out with greatest respect to everybody here who might have contributed to this. I think the zero waste could, in my view, should be dropped. It's not directly on target with what this climate resolution is trying to do. I understand it's part of what C2E2 does, but this particular aspect of what C2E2 does, 8 is way too many. But I would just drop the waste aspect of it.
Well, I think most climate action plans, they do include waste, and what we throw away is huge amount, and
Well, if the county
much
comes
of
up
this
with
is
this climate
reduction.
action plan is fine, but this is just our letter to the board saying.
Yeah.
Do a climate action plan.
Yeah, I personally won't fight to keep it in because I agree with you, Doug. And I also think that, you know, when the staff sits down to do this, they're gonna have different objectives, et cetera. To me, the real issue here is major sources of carbon emissions, which is the energy sector, the building sector, the transportation.
So maybe just throw in zero waste as a reference, just those 3 words, zero waste, in one of the other sections. Like adaptation. Michaela, did you have your hand?
Yeah, I mean, it four mentions like lead version 5, and I didn't know how long this is gonna go for. At some point, we'll be on to version 6, and do we even need to call it out specifically?
So be like the most current.
I just, because county still keeps offering builders the option of going with lead 4.1, so.
Is there, I know you have to step out, but is there anything you'd like to say about, because you are the person who's going to be developing the policy? Anything we can do to be helpful to you? We're gonna make the categories pure categories, but we're gonna stuff them full of stuff, so I'm not sure that's,
I think it's useful to know where the commission's head is at, right? In terms of where we want to focus our energy over the next several years. And to have it articulated here is helpful. And then to the extent that the board decides to gather that information and spin it into a resolution or some other document, I think that's fine, right? It doesn't have to be perfectly sort of aligned, right? As long as we understand the sentiment, which I haven't seen this version of the document, but from what I've seen, and I apologize, getting over my sinus stuff, but
and surgery. She's also getting over surgery.
and so but I do understand and I appreciate the whole of government, whole of community, leading by example from what I've seen, and the ideas that are being translated I think are important for not only the board to see, but for staff and ultimately the public. It's a good place to be.
So thank you. Rob?
So I added a very late comment here just on the closing, and maybe this is follow up on what specific actions or resources are needed at the very close of this letter. What we mentioned, recommend giving Air Team resources and tools and being specific about what those are. Is that a 50% budget increase? I don't know. What do you think? I mean,
Yeah, the original document had a little bit about big data and AI and how that's increasingly being used to analyze some of these problems and bringing that to bear. There's some discomfort with kind of going into another realm here, opening a can of worms. And so I deleted that sentence, but I think maybe leaves it hanging a little bit. My intent here is, to make sure that if we're going to do a beautiful, useful dashboard of county carbon emissions, that it's not based on 2016 data. That's a problem in my view. So the fact that that happened this year makes me think, yes, this team needs a lot more resources, tools to be able to apply their efforts to data sets and data that matters.
But yes, they do need more. So I don't know if we want to say without prejudice to resourcing them for everything else.
A data scientist, or what are we asking?
yeah, exactly. Like, do we subscription to certain software? Do we need to hire money for a contractor, do certain, like, I mean, this is kind of, you're closing a letter with an ask to the county board and tell them to do something there. About what we're asking. So it really, if you're gonna ask for something, let's ask for it. What is it, right? Because otherwise they're not gonna.
Yeah.
Well, some of this comes down to kind of figuring out what kind of plan they want. you kind of need to know what things they're thinking of doing and then how could it be funded? I mean, the way most of the planning is done is how much funding are you going to give us and plan around that. So it's kind of, making sure that they're putting in enough resources to actually, do these programs and prioritize these types of programs. I mean, we've suspected and kind of raised the question with every budget that we've looked at over the last few years about air staffing and is it sufficient?
I really would like to be able to approve this letter and send it so that it still is timely. And we are going to run out of time. I would love that last piece to be broader, but I think you're making that point.
I would, if it's okay with the commissioners, I'd like to take one more pass at the language. I would propose to consolidate some of the numbered sections into others,
Right.
moving 2 into 1.
Yeah.
And then either 6 or 7 or 7 and 8 into
Yeah.
others, so that we have 5
Yeah.
total
Yeah.
bulleted numbers, and then clean up this last paragraph to add specificity, circulate it for final edits, or
You can't circulate for final edits, but I think that
We
the way the commission's work, we have to approve it tonight. And then, so someone could make a motion to approve it, subject to final review by the chair or the chair and the chair of the energy committee or whoever. Well, not the chair of the energy committee. Well, yes, not January 1st yet. So if someone would like to make a motion to that effect, we can make
Quick mention for the ending too, because we end up talking about the community action plan, but we don't end mentioning talking about the climate resolution that we started with. So I'm wondering if we should end by also mentioning the adoption of that.
Yes.
right. So there are things we could work on.
the data idea, the number 1.
Yeah, that's a great idea. And then maybe we can ask for resources from the air team. The last ask could be more resources for the air team.
Well, idea somebody suggested to me was that if the climate policy office is going to be writing the climate action plan, that office would probably use a contractor. And I would like to ask that office if that's accurate or not, but I don't want to make presumptions.
She's nodding.
Yes. With I've coordinated a number of comprehensive plan element updates. And we do utilize contractors to assist us not only in the search, the benchmarking, and to give us ideas to help draft the plan, but we also use them to bring information to a commission or an ad hoc committee that stood up to talk about the various elements of the plan before it's even in a document. So they extend our reach. It's, they always say, right, you hire a contractor to tell you what time it is. It's just that in this particular instance, we don't have enough staff to do it all on our own, and we want to do a quality job. So we want to make sure that we have enough hands to do it, and that's why we would look for outside resources.
Well,
Okay, kind of, so without getting too specific in the last paragraph, but maybe we can kind of recognize that and say, we that C2E2 recognize that past this climate resolution, doing this climate action plan is going above and beyond what the air team, what the climate policy office is currently funded to do. So we recommend you provide the additional resources to make sure that they could do quality, to hire contractors, do whatever. So basically we're saying this is going to be above the baseline of their normal job responsibilities, and therefore they need additional resources to do this job. And that,
without dictating how they spend them, whether it's a contract.
well, and it's not just the resources to do the plan, it's actually the resources to implement.
Sure.
Right.
Which some of that hopefully will be starting before they actually finalize the plan.
Right, so broader.
So it can be kind of.
So do we have a motion? We don't, but we could.
So moved, yeah. So moved to approve the letter as is, subject to final edits and approved by the chair of C2E2 and the Energy Committee.
Thank you. Am I allowed to second it?
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We have Jonathan and Kevin online.
Am I allowed to vote online? I don't think I am.
Dan?
Okay. Okay, good. All right. So thank you very much, Elizabeth. I know that's been a lot of work. You wrote the first letter and then you did the whole energy committee and all the revisions, now more revisions. So really, really appreciate it. And it is great that
You're gonna give me a pass on my next go around for the site plan review.
And not to mention that it's your birthday. So thank you for the cupcakes. And I'm glad we all voted to.
It worked.
Got your gift. Yeah.
Okay, so I sent around our annual report of what we did in 2024. And when I looked before I came, there were no comments or edits on it. So I wasn't really planning to do it. But are there comments? I made it, it's different from what it's been before. And then it's got a lot of bullets. It's sort of short form, and what it mostly does is reiterate the things that we think are important. It says, here are the things that we said all year. This is what we told you, and in all kinds of letters and all kinds of places. So what we think.
Do we have representatives on all those?
I was wondering, but I just have
The bicycle advisory committee, pedestrian, I don't think so.
people assigned to the bicycle advisory committee. Advisory committee. But we could drop those. Joan and I were talking.
Or maybe
about
just say potential or something, in case you get somebody interested in it.
so we could just drop the bicycle advisory committee and the pedestrian advisory committee. There was one that I had a note that this even still exists. And weren't you?
Biosolid?
Oh, I'm on that
Joan
one.
is on that.
Okay. All right.
Been on that one for ages.
Some of these we are very well represented on.
Yeah.
I don't know about the Chesapeake Bay Ordinance Review Committee.
I'm the signee to that.
Okay, and
And they have never called me.
yeah, right,
Some of those things are really random.
but
They're
they're gonna call you because Eileen was saying that they're gonna bring an ordinance proposal.
Yeah, I saw
in
that.
the Spring. So, public spaces master plan, that was another, okay, see,
Yeah.
all right, it's accurate now.
Yeah.
Any others? Any other comments? Rob?
I'm sorry, I'm just,
Same solid waste.
I'm big on by the numbers,
all
like,
Uh-huh.
we're not quantitative in here, like,
Yeah.
for example, do we have a count on the number of site plan review, like letters, number of letters we sent to the county?
Yeah, let's-
Never heard
Can
a
we,
report
on
out on that.
cover page, do you like to buy the number, like,
That's been kind of smart.
that's one I mean, I would really like the quantitative if we can on the number of letters we sent, and then the,
Operational,
Yeah, but there were hardly any SPs.
like a 10-year planning process.
There's a list of the SPs letters, there are only 3, so that's why I'm not quantitative, because last year there were like 22.
Yes, and a.
okay, but those weren't the only letters we sent.
Yes, no, they're all listed.
Treated, send it.
Letters
If you want to say
from-
a amount to, 20 letters or whatever this number is.
Yes,
that
yeah,
helps.
yeah.
And I have the climate change resolution letter in brackets, depending on what we do tonight.
Each of
Yeah.
these bullets are one letter and then
Yes.
this is just the
Right,
general.
so it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Then you scroll down, 9, 10, 11, 12. 13, 14, 15.
I think that's significant. They got,
It's a
Yeah.
lot fewer than the previous year, but that's because there were so many fewer SPRC.
still, but get concurrence on 15 letters from the volunteer citizen
More than
commissioners. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's significant. I think it's, the other comment, and this is more editorial, Doug, but when the key takeaways from our work, like generally, everything here is, we talk about what we emphasize, these consistent themes, but then everything here is in present tense of what we emphasized rather than past tense of what we submitted and what we accomplished.
The Gulf Branch?
Let's go up and see what you're talking about, Rob.
It goes up, sorry, key takeaways.
So these things, yeah, because first.
They would say that C2E2 emphasize these themes, and then everything there, everything after that is in present tense.
Right,
Do
because
this,
we
leave
are-
this, use that, right?
Inside the GBIP, it did not pass. So I think all of that is what we will be emphasizing again this year. I think it is all for the kids. Nothing is done. I wish it was.
It
You go home.
doesn't bother me.
Yeah,
It doesn't
you're
bother me.
okay.
It doesn't, it's not raising red flag. It's a
We can just,
little bit,
C2E emphasize.
Pink flag?
totally optimistic.
Can you just say?
I mean, the priorities are ongoing,
All
but the
year.
report.
Can you put, instead of doing emphasize, just put
Right.
emphasize?
The report's supposed to be about what we, it's a snapshot of time, what
Emphasizes.
we accomplished this year. And if we just say, we keep saying the same things this year that we did last year, that we did the year before that, because these are our priorities, that's not really saying what we accomplished.
That's of course this year's C2E2 emphasizes consistent themes, which we will continue to emphasize. I don't know, this last year, which continue to be priorities.
Well, no, it should be emphasized.
Yes, it should
Definitely,
be.
actually.
That's what it was.
Is that what?
No.
Are any of these new this year? Or could we call some of those out to say, you know, this year we began to focus on,
But the GBIP is new.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Well, the opportunities change, but
I
the,
guess.
the kind of the themes have been consistent. And decarbonization, phasing out fossil fuels.
Right. I think we pulled these, but I guess on a more global basis, I'm not sure, you know, who actually reads the annual report, whereas our 2025 work plan is something I think we should talk about. So scroll up a little bit. So the energy, the solar tax exemption program, that was something that just happened this year and actually is done.
Yes,
Thanks to the energy.
it's a great accomplishment. Thank you, Doug.
Right. So if you go up a little bit more, we talked about, you know, so whole of government, whole of community, we've talked about a lot. Green building incentive policy, that was a big focus this year. So that was new. Keep scrolling down, please, Jenna. So innovation, that whole concept was new to our letters this year. And, you know, SPRCs are always going to be a focus. Zero waste goals, you know, we talked about that earlier today. That was something that Joan felt strongly about because at the beginning of the year, it was still, you know, the zero waste plan was passed in 2023. But
No,
we-
actually it was passed in passed this year.
was it?
20, we sent a letter in November 2023, but it still took another 7 or 8 months for the county. They passed it in June of this year.
Okay, so that was something that people, that C2E2 was involved in.
So we,
And
there
then
were,
the solar tax- so most of those things were,
it should be.
you know, were specific to this year.
Yeah, I don't want to hold it up. It's just stylistic. I mean, I just think we could be more powerful with what we actually accomplish and what we did this year in a snapshot in time, the way we present it. But I don't want to hold this up. I think a lot of the information is there already. So if everyone else is fine with it, good to go.
This gets sent to someone, annual report?
Because of the county board.
And
I know.
post it on our website too.
Yeah.
And Rob proposed that we get testimonials from members of the county board that they relied on our letters, but I didn't really know how to do that.
I
Yeah,
mean, I don't know if it's appropriate, but
You're
I think
sending
we've
them
heard
their
about
own
this come in here and
testimonial.
say, I look
That's kinda
forward to your
weird.
letters, but
Yes, we have.
what's more powerful than that is that this commission is serving the board that appointed us and they're using information and the analysis and the advice that we give them to inform their decisions. I mean, that's our number one
Yeah, you
objective.
absolutely did say
Yeah.
that, but I don't know how to exactly,
You don't need to feed him his own comments back to him.
yeah.
Yeah, we can go back to, let's go to the videotape. We go back and, they're all online, right? So if he was here in person, we can go back and look at the YouTube, write his quote down, say, you said this, do you agree? We have it on videotape, He's, yes. Put a little text box in there and say, here's what the county board is saying about this C2E2 and how valuable it is.
I think he came in and said it to us before we were recording.
Yeah,
But anyway, let's look at. As it is, we have 7 minutes. So, there is.
Did you add the Gulf Branch letter?
Should be, I don't, if it's not on our website under letters sent, then I don't. I don't know about it separately. Well, I did check the ones that I was involved in, but I didn't have a culprit. Was that, I don't know. Joan is looking at her phone. Yeah, so let's, so this part is not really changed. Our priority objectives are not really changed. Maybe a few words here and there, but maybe it's not substantive. And we can adopt this, you know. I know that a number of other committees have adopted theirs, so, but do people see their names on here? It's a, you should look at your name, you should.
I did
That
that.
was like 2023. Just.
Pick up the question marks.
I don't know.
Unless there's an objection.
You better object if you don't want to do it.
So I haven't gotten an email from this group since November 18th, so I think I fell off the list. So I'm very unprepared, I apologize.
Oh,
But
I think you get an.
I definitely want to do something.
I think you got an invite from Jenna to join the C2E2.
Yeah, I'll talk with you.
Yeah,
later.
I stopped putting you guys on individually. I wonder if Alex is.
Yeah, I didn't realize that everything I got was because of you. I thought I was on the groups, but I'll. Yeah, I'm happy to.
Yeah, it looks like it's still pending.
Yeah, so Alex probably.
I'll
didn't get-
resend you. Sorry.
So the paragraph was something about homeowners?
Yes.
Sorry. Yeah, sure. Oh, it's great. My neighbor just got your top solar.
Yeah, it's my professional background.
Yeah, that's good, Melissa, to help, but Joe, I knew you had a background in this.
Oh,
Melissa, I threw you in on some other thing related to related to batteries. Because
Cool,
I know
yeah.
you do have a background in battery. Yep. So transportation, when the dark day comes that Joan is no longer on our commission, we will need someone to really get into transportation. So, and Joe, you raised your hand for that earlier, but that was just one project. But, so Doug, you've already said yes. That solar panels, if you scroll, there's battery storage. There's your name again, Melissa.
Yeah.
But we said this is a living document.
I was gonna say, I mean.
Not like,
Yeah.
it's not like,
Yeah.
some of these are big issues that we'll all be working on. So, but I know that as a new person, it's harder to get, it's harder to find a way in. So, so Alex probably hasn't seen this either.
No worries. They haven't received.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So I mean, this work plan is fairly different from, I ran out of deciding, I see question marks there. Creating microgrids and resiliency hubs and energy storage. There are a lot of people.
I can do that.
I can help with that.
that looks good.
Yeah. But-
Let's just put the energy. Elizabeth and Rob's fine here. So there were a lot of new, recognizing that Melissa hasn't had a chance to look at it, maybe not everyone has, but there's a lot of new stuff here this year. But it's true that it will change. What we think will happen in 2025 will definitely change. But changes to our SPRC checklist, GVIP, climate change resolution, a lot of these things will still come on.
Can we go back a minute? What are we doing on social equity?
Oops, I think we went by it.
Yeah, we often do that.
I think that.
This one?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Yeah, I think some of that really requires some discussion in terms of what do we mean in a meaningful way?
Yeah.
I mean, certainly what they threw in the GPIP, I don't think.
And what we threw in our checklist is that
Yeah,
it's hard.
yeah. So again, it's, I mean, certainly building affordable housing, making sure we have programs that are making sure that, you know, low, medium income residents are getting resources to, you know, improve energy efficiency. In some cases, just better transportation and other things beneficial to people that are more disadvantaged. But we kind of need to.
The action plan we have to write.
I mean,
that-
this has become a much more,
I think it needs a broader discussion.
Jonathan?
Same
I
time.
mean, this has become a much more robust area in the last 4 years because of the whole Biden Justice 40 initiative, and there's been a lot written about it. So I mean, yeah, you can talk about you know, if we are going to be if we're going to be so examples are the order in which parts of the county are funded for transition, and that whether that's for electric vehicles of government vehicles starting in the communities where asthma or other health outcomes are the worst, which normally coincides with low income, right? And it's about prioritizing access to energy efficiency upgrades, and you know, I mean, it's kind of down the road, but green building incentive program could be contributing to a fund that that enables energy efficiency upgrades and or electrification for household appliances that lower the burning of gas in low income housing. There's just a lot of different ways these things are done and can be done, and planning in the for greater access to transportation, to electric vehicle charging stations, the whole thing. I mean, there's a ton that's been written in the last 4 years about exactly this stuff.
Okay. So more comments. So we can update this as we go, and I see that Jen's added that we should do work this year on, which I think is, you know, we see that with the checklist too, that this is an area that it's hard for us to figure out how to engage.
Yeah. This has struck me for some time as something where we need a partnership. We need to know somebody who has roots in the community we're talking about abstractly to be a partner with, figure out what things we have to offer and what they have to offer, and come up with an agenda that touches people.
Something like getting rid of gas stoves would hit 2 metrics, health metric, yeah. To use.
Well, maybe we can bring in somebody from.
But I think
NAACP.
we have to ask people, know the community better than we do.
So Stephanie from and because I'm horrible at names, I forget Stephanie's last name, but Stephanie on the energy committee up until recently, I don't sat on the Arlington NAACP climate justice or environmental justice committee. And I mean, the former head of the NAACP for Arlington is now a county board member, so we could talk with him directly to ask
So I know that we can go through this work. It's after 9 already. I don't know that
Sorry.
we put plan section by section and update it. And really, the idea of sending the documents out in advance. Actually, as John was saying earlier, if people comment on them as we go, then when we can actually, because 2 hours is just not that long. But it is a living document. I'm sure we will change it. I'm sure and I'm happy to talk about it more. Do we want to adopt it? Do we want to approve the annual report?
I moved to adopt the annual report. I think we skipped that step that we're reviewing it. Do you want to do them one at a time or do you want to?
Sure, let's do them one at a time. So annual report, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, any opposed? Okay,
I moved to adopt the work plan for 2025.
Sorry, does that mean this is immovable once we?
No.
Yes, you're lost.
We'll check it.
no,
It's just general.
Internal plan, right?
Yeah.
right, it's like any work plan that you adopt at your office or anywhere else at the beginning, before the year starts. You try to set goals and your individual personnel goals and all those things, you roll it all out, and then you look at the end of the year and man, the year went completely differently than what you expected.
So I assume double checking. Sounds good.
Yeah,
I second.
all right, all in favor? Thank you. There's something to be said for, Joan and I went to a meeting on Monday and the other commissions had all, adopted their annual reports and their work plans. We're getting ready to send them. Their meetings were just last week instead of this week. So there's something to be said for not being, for keeping the wheels moving. But yes, we can definitely change these things. In the annual report, I'm not sure people pour over. Well, we still have a quorum. Let's look at the summary. And hopefully people wanted to comment on the summary, have commented on the summary. I did, I think.
You might have made 1 or 2 changes.
Yeah, that looked good. So may I have a motion to approve the summary, but thanks to Jenna for preparing it.
I move we approve the summary with changes.
Second. Okay, all in favor, say aye.
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 Okay, so on the updates in a world fast. So we've talked about all these things. So I think we talked about the staff transition that Chase talked about, the leadership committee and here at C2E2. Talked about the GBIP, the SPRCs. The NRJAG is the meeting of the 3 commissions dealing with the environment, which is forestry, natural resources, C2E2, and Parks and Rec. Joan and I are the representatives there. We should put that on the list. I think it is on the list. Anyway, we had a meeting this week. They're working very hard on tree canopy and on their annual reports and work plans for 2025. Solid Waste Committee, still looking for people who would love to get involved in solid waste. And I think that is there anything, Doug, you would like to say about the Energy Committee as your last official report?
I would like to say 2 minutes each about 3 items, but can we put that over to the next meeting of this commission and I'll share them at that time?
Sure.
And I'll just mention the master transportation plan is next month where they're asking the advisory groups to provide their goals, which they define as one word or short phrase. I think I'll provide a little bit more context and also suggest, but it would be kind of frequency or safety or climate. So I kind of want to, I kind of like decarbonization, zero emissions is going to be a bit more descriptive than climate. But anyway, I will share in advance of the next meeting some of my thoughts and people can add into it. What I also would like to see, I'm not sure if we'll succeed in doing it, is getting them to also adopt some very high level goals. Like, goals for or at least what the measurable goals are going to be, like, reducing vehicle miles traveled or increasing share of trips that are on, not by private vehicle kind of thing. So.
All right. Thank you all I'm not going to offer any other chances to say anything. Thank you all.
Oh.
Thank you. Thank you all for there and for all your contributions, and appreciate everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Can you imagine working on the part?
I know.